Good afternoon, Mr. Tompkins. Please come in and have a seat. It's nice to see you again. The reason that I called you in today was because the Supreme Court has made a decision on your case, and we need to look at the ramifications of that decision and how best to move forward. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not decide in your favor today and has actually remanded the case back down to a lower court for yet another trial. The reasons behind this are somewhat complicated, and I'd like to take some time to discuss them with you if that's all right. As you remember, when we first started this case, we decided to sue the railroad in federal court. We were allowed to do this because you're a citizen of Pennsylvania and the railroad is incorporated in New York. And so because you're citizens of two different states, we had what's called diversity jurisdiction. And we were able to remove the case to the federal court. We decided to remove it to federal court because the Pennsylvania common law, or the cases that were decided before this case that were similar to yours in Pennsylvania, really didn't seem like they were going to be very favorable to you. There was a pretty good presumption of trespass that we would need to try to overcome in order for the railroad to be found negligent. And the federal body of common law, or the federal common law as we commonly call it, that were the cases that were decided in federal court before this time, were a little more lenient, and we were more likely to get a verdict of negligence that was in your favor if we tried this case in federal court. And in fact, that's what happened. We got your verdict and your judgment, and then it was appealed, and we were able to sustain that judgment. Today, the Supreme Court used this case as a way to look at how they've handled diversity cases for many, many years in the United States, and they have found that for a few reasons that are in some ways understandable, that this may not be the best way of going about handling cases that are in federal court only on the basis of diversity jurisdiction, which is your type of case. What they decided was that having a case just on the basis of diversity and allowing citizens of two different states to then have another way of suing that was an avenue that wasn't open to issues between two citizens of the same state, where they wouldn't have federal law to go by, was discriminatory and was not fair to citizens of the same state. So that having these two different options of state court law and federal law, and potentially having two wildly different outcomes, was not justifiable in their eyes. They also felt that it infringed a little bit too much on the state's rights to make state law, and that really wasn't the purview of the federal law. So they sort of devised this compromise where they said, if you're going to have a diversity jurisdiction, and that's the only reason you're in federal court, something like our case where there's two different citizens of two different states, that the federal procedure will apply, but that the state common law has to apply in what they call substantive law, or that the actual decisions that were made with regard to cases similar to these, they were going to abide by common law of that state. So that instead of using federal common law, they sort of abolished the concept of federal common law and said that we would be using state law. So when this case gets remanded to trial, again, the federal courts will be using Pennsylvania common law in order to decide the outcome. That's discouraging for us because, as I said before, the reason we moved the case to federal court was because we felt that Pennsylvania common law was not going to be in your favor. And it's very likely, unfortunately, that a court that uses Pennsylvania common law may find that the railroad was not negligent, and they may not award you a judgment. And so with that information, I'd like to have some time for you to think about that, for you to ask me any questions that you have about what the judgment means. If anything I've said to you is difficult to understand, or you need some more explanation, please feel free to ask me. And then we can discuss how best to move forward with the resources that you have, okay? So take a moment to think about that, and please let me know what else I can do to explain this further for you.